The middle class was once the cornerstone of the American dream. A house in the suburbs, a white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and enough money to just live comfortably. And to get there, we were told if we followed a certain formula, go to school, get good grades, and get a good job, and just make a livable wage, you could live that dream. You weren't filthy rich, and you weren't desperately poor, you were part of the middle class. But today, that middle class and American dream looks very different now. Cost of living and wage stagnation have made what we now know to be the middle class more of an actual dream. The idea of the middle class and the comfort and security that comes with it is really just more of an aspiration now than an actual reality for most Americans. Hey friends, welcome back. Today we're breaking down what middle class income actually looks like in 2025 today and what it really means to be middle class. Millions of people identify as middle class in America, but what does it actually mean? And if I were to ask you, are you middle class? The answer is maybe. If you look at the news, politicians will always mention the middle class. There will always be someone who has less money than you and someone who has more money than you. So it will always feel like they're talking to you. And to be fair, there isn't a single definition, but according to Pew Research Foundation, 90% of Americans consider themselves as part of the middle class. And the middle class is defined as having incomes between 2/3 to 2 times the US median household income. In 2025, the US median household income is around $74,600. That means Americans earning between $44,760 and $149,200 are considered middle class. And it's a big range of over $100,000. And really, it's because of different lifestyles and economic experiences. So for example, even millionaires might consider themselves middle class. According to this article by CNBC, 31% of millionaires consider themselves part of the working class. It shows that simply having more wealth doesn't necessarily equate to a higher social standing. And the opposite side is that people with much lower incomes also consider themselves to be middle class. And according to Gallup, 54% of Americans identify as middle class, and that includes people with an annual household income of less than $40,000. And depending on how you define middle class, that number can go up all the way to 87%. And really, it shows a lot of Americans underestimate how much income is actually needed for a middle class lifestyle, and that the image of middle class security is more of an aspiration than a true reality. And how we view the middle class is all based on how we live our life, what we want in life, and just the people around us. But wherever you fall within that middle class, I think we can always agree that at the end of the day, the same interests are generally shared, and to still get by and live a decent life. And second, let's look into what Americans believe it takes to even be middle class. An article from the Washington Post shows that 93% of Americans believe that they need a secure job to be a part of the middle class, 91% in the ability to save money for the future, and 90% believe in being able to afford an emergency $1,000 expense without debt. And what is very interesting is that if you look towards the bottom of the list, homeownership is at 60%. What used to be the cornerstone of the American dream isn't seen as much as a necessity to be middle class. People rather have financial stability and security over home ownership, and it's very much because home ownership has become almost impossible for a lot of Americans, with 7 in 10 Americans concerned with the cost of housing, and 80% of homes are unaffordable in larger US counties. The only thing that sets you apart is your lifestyle and situation right now at this very moment. So let's look into net worth. The lower middle class has a median net worth of $61,260, the middle class of $145,200, and upper middle class of $269,100. And for a lot of middle class families, a lot of their net worth are in their homes and real estate. Equity usually makes up the largest pieces of their wealth, but having so much of their net worth can be both good and bad. In 2024, the median US home price was $419,200, while US median income was at $80,610. That means in 2024, a home buyer would need to earn at least $116,782, meaning most people are about 50% short on their income. Not only do you need enough for a down payment, but you need to consider property tax and insurance. And this considers that you spend no more than 30% of your earnings on monthly housing payments so that you have enough money left over for other expenses and obligations. And before we go on, if you're enjoying this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and share. Let me know your thoughts on the new middle class down in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. And next is that everything is just more expensive than ever. Nearly half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, making it that much harder for them to save for emergencies, investments, let alone a house. And for that reason, the middle class is being squeezed from both sides. You've probably heard the saying that the rich get richer while the poor get poorer, and it's completely true for a few reasons. In 1985, the median price of a home was $80,000, and adjusted for inflation, that would be around $220,000 today. But the median home price is now over $400,000. And over 50 years, wages have increased about 15%. And if you look closer, when adjusted for inflation, wages have actually remained stagnant. Everything costs more, but wages haven't increased whatsoever. In addition, college tuition has increased by over 1,200%. Healthcare costs have more than tripled. Childcare by 214%, and grocery by 25% just in the past 4 years. And on top of that, more Americans are taking on debt just to survive. In 1984, the average major expenses for a family of 4 was around $13,227, and the average worker would need to work 30 weeks to cover this salary. And today, the average major living expense is $77,280, and the typical worker would need to work 56 weeks to cover this cost. And just to remind you that there are only 52 weeks in a year. The reality is that the typical worker isn't living paycheck to paycheck anymore. It's actually much worse. And today, the average American household carries over $90,000 in debt. That includes credit cards, student loans, and mortgages. And on top of all these economic pressures, people's values and priorities have simply changed. There's a new American dream. It's not so much about a traditional house and a white picket fence. It's just about surviving and making ends meet. Fewer people can afford homes. Home ownership has declined, and a lot of younger people prefer renting because it gives that flexibility and doesn't come with the burden of property tax and a hefty mortgage. Less financial security also means delaying major life milestones. The average age of first-time homebuyers has risen to 36 years old, compared to 29 in 1981. That also means that those who do buy at a later age will also likely work later into their retirement age to pay off their mortgages. And in a world where pensions are no longer a thing, and job security is just a concept, more people are taking on side hustles just to make ends meet. Over 40% of Americans now have some form of a side hustle to either pay bills and supplement their income. Whether it's Uber, DoorDash, or freelance work, the regular 9 to 5 is no longer enough to support struggling middle-class families. Because of all of this, the middle class is more about how we feel about our values. A recent study by Charles Schwab shows how Americans perceive wealth. 72% of Americans believe having a fulfilling personal life better describes wealth than a monetary asset like their career. 70% valued not having to stress about money, while 30% valued having money over others. And 70% also valued experiences over material goods. There has been a great shift in the American dream and middle class, and American wealth is more about the quality of life and personal fulfillment than money. The idea of meritocracy, that as long as you're determined and work hard, you'll be successful, regardless if you came from a wealthy background. And if you just study, get good grades, go to school, and land a great job, you'll have security. But the middle class is not what it used to be. What was once the foundation and cornerstone of the American dream has become changed from the weight of economic pressures, stagnant wages, and rising costs. Financial struggles are reshaping people's values and priorities and what success realistically looks like. Wealth and ownership look very different now, and for a lot of people. A wealthy life is more about survival, financial security, and having a fulfilling life. And being middle class today is just as much about your values and lifestyle choices as it is about your income. Investing your income and balancing wealth and happiness, or whatever that might mean to you, are all critical components. A lot of these pressures are out of your control. How much it costs for a house, what it takes to be a part of the middle class. But what is in your control is how and what you spend. So check out the next video on how consumerism manipulates you to spend mindlessly.